Check it out. It is the new Skoda Enyaq. I've been dying to drive this car because it is so important. It's Skoda's first fully electric vehicle, and because it wears this badge, you'll actually be able to afford one. Now, what makes this car so interesting is that it's based on the Volkswagen ID.4, but if you look at it on paper, it actually appears to be slightly better value for money than its VW sibling. Well, today I'm going to find out whether that's the case or not. But before I start picking this car apart, remember to hit the like button and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one. It's worth bearing in mind that the Enyaq is based on the ID.4, and whereas the ID.4's got more of a rounded and funky design, the Enyaq is more aggressive, sharper. And personally, I actually think it's the best looking Skoda currently available. Now, the grille is the company's signature grille, but because it's an electric car, there's nothing to keep cool back here, so it's completely blanked out, which is fine. Now, soon you'll actually be able to option a light-up grille, and I think they look ridiculous on most cars, BMW X6. But on here, because it's an EV and the grille is pretty much pointless, they've got to do something. You have to retain that brand identity. So I think lighting it up at the front is actually a pretty cool idea, and I think it would look great. Lovely LED lights down the side here. Onto the wheels, they start at 19 inches, but they go up to 21s. These are the 20s, and I think they look very nice. You still have a nice chunky bit of sidewall, so curbing shouldn't be too much of a problem. Now, on this base spec car, the 60, we have a bit of black cladding along the bottom of the car, which is quite well done. So not only does it save the bodywork from getting scuffed up if you park next to a verge, but it actually shrinks the profile of the car somewhat. It makes it look like it's sitting a little bit higher than it actually is, and a little less chunky at the back. And speaking of a chunky rear end, that's really what sets the Enyaq apart from the ID.4. So, whereas the ID.4 is a little bit shallower at the back here and it's got more of a coupe-like roofline, on the Enyaq, it's a bit taller here. So you've got a slightly taller boot line, but they've still managed to retain that sloping rear roofline so that it looks sleek and cool. And there's also a nice little wing here. This is plastic, but it's decent quality plastic. And overall, I just think it's a really smart looking car. Now, that brings me on to the Sport line. So we're going to put up some images of the Sport line now, and you can see it looks very different. Overall, there's just less plastic cladding around the outside. You get bigger wheels and a more aggressive front end. And at some point, Skoda plans on introducing a VRS model, which is going to look seriously cool. The Enyaq also comes with proper aerodynamic aids, a bit like this vent here, which you also get on the ID.4, and it actually functions. Now, the way is that air will be coming in through here, and it comes out the back of the wheel arch, and that improves airflow around the car, reduces drag, and importantly, ekes out a little bit more power from the battery. I've got no idea, though, whether this front splitter does anything, but it looks pretty damn cool. But what I find really funny, though, is that you've got these little vents on the side of the car that are not only fake, they are completely pointless because you're not keeping an engine cool. Why are they there? Now, as we got early access to the Enyaq, this is a Czech car, and so the steering wheel is on the left-hand side. But don't worry, if you go and buy one, when sales open up in June, the steering wheel will be on the right-hand side. Now, that brings me on to price. So, in the current range that's available for the Enyaq, it starts off at the 60 nav. Now, prices start at £32,000, and that includes the £2,500 government grant. That's because the 60 falls below the threshold needed for that grant, which is great. But if you then go and upgrade to the 80, then you're spending over £38,000, and it's not eligible for the grant. So there's quite a jump between going from a 60 to an 80. Nothing that massive though, because you do get an improvement on range. There's also the sports line, and that comes in at £42,000, which actually makes it a little bit more expensive than the current ID.4. So the 60 and the 80 come with 5 different trim levels. They start off with the Loft, which is included as standard, but you can pay a little bit more and go for the Lodge, the Lounge, the Suite, and the Eco Suite. And it's the Eco Suite that I think is the most interesting. And while it's not vegan friendly, it does use actual leather. The leather is treated with crushed olives instead of chemicals. And you also find more recycled materials throughout the cabin. So it's a bit more eco-friendly, if not vegan friendly. Now the car that we've got here is the Loft. It's the bog standard one, and I absolutely love it because you've got this lovely material on the dash, which reminds me of the back of a Google Pixel phone or the interior of the Honda E. And it just means that you've kind of got this lovely material across everything, and it's almost as if everything becomes a soft touch surface. So it's over the dashboard here, the side of the center console, it's in the doors, and part of it is on the seats. You also have some leather on the side as well, which feels very lovely indeed. Now, personally, I prefer it to the cabin that you get in the more expensive ID.4 because the ID.4 has a lot more plastic, whereas that's mostly covered up by this lovely material in the Enyaq. And that's kind of where the comparisons with the ID.4 kind of start to fall apart as well. It may be based on the VW, but this isn't just a rebadged car. There's a lot of differences inside the cabin. For instance, the center console is very different. We have a vertical cup holder in the ID.4, whereas it's horizontal in the Enyaq. You also have a little divider in here as well, although it's not adjustable, so one drink size fits all. We've also got a little storage compartment down here for keys or whatever you want. A coin holder, which is hilarious. Funny to see that in 2021. And we actually have a proper armrest back here. So on the ID.4, you have these little armrests that are actually attached to the seats in here. It's fixed to the center console, so you can share it with your passenger. Massive bin down here. A nice big storage tray, and I could lose my arm in there. It is so deep. Very handy indeed. There's also some storage compartments underneath the center console as well, which is a little bit different to what you get on the ID.4 because the ID.4 kind of ends around here and you just have a slightly more open feeling cabin. Now, we have wireless charging spec'd in this one, but it does come as an optional extra. It's not, doesn't come as standard. And we also have some physical buttons down here. So while everything on the ID.4 is done with sliders, you actually have physical buttons to press. I love that. It's so good to see them still on proper cars. We've also got a 13-inch screen right in the center of the dash, which is 3 inches bigger than the one that you get on the ID.4. You've still got a slider down here for the volume, which is pretty frustrating, but we have access to the climate controls on the screen, which is nice and convenient. I don't have to go through lots of different menus. I can just increase it there or decrease it there and whack on the heated seats if I want to. Now, the system itself is pretty standard Skoda. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, it's not going to be any different on the Enyaq. I find it pretty damn clear, if a little bit dull, but there's definitely a jump in responsiveness on the system that you get in here versus the one that you get on the VW. I do think it's really slick. And we actually drove the Ford Mustang Mach-E recently. You can click the link on the top right hand corner to check that out. And I actually think it's slightly smoother on here compared to the Mustang too. So while it's still not perfect, it can still be a bit fiddly to navigate, particularly when you're driving. I do think it's better than some of its competitors. Of course, you're probably just going to get in, plug in your iPhone or your Android phone and use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto like I do. Now, coupled to the screen is a small virtual cockpit. Now, it's the same size as the one that you get on the ID.4 and functions pretty much the same as well. The only difference is this one is integrated into the dashboard, whereas the ID.4's is perched on top. And so you kind of have this slightly more snug feel in the Enyaq, whereas the ID.4 admittedly feels a little bit more airy. I don't think one is better than the other, I just think they feel quite a bit different. And another big difference to the VW is we've got physical buttons on the steering wheel, whereas the VW has got the haptic feedback. Some people really don't like the haptic feedback, but in all fairness, I don't mind it that much. In fact, I quite like it. But on here, we've got good old-fashioned buttons and also a scroller for the volume on the left-hand side and for everything else on the right. I'm in the back of the Enyaq and it's super roomy. So I'm just under 6 foot and legroom is absolutely fine. I do have the driver's seat in my position as well. And the same goes for headroom. I've got plenty still to go. So if you're 6 foot and over, getting in the back of the Enyaq shouldn't be a problem at all. Now, what's really cool is we've actually got a bit of mood lighting at the side here, which I didn't really notice at first because it's such a bright day, it's actually quite hard to see, but mood lighting in the back, which is very cool. And now you might have seen on some Skodas as well that you have a little pocket in the back for your smartphone, as well as a regular pocket that you can put other bits and bobs in. Whether you need an actual pocket for a smartphone, I don't know, but if you do, it's there. As for smartphone connectivity though, I can't find any USB or USB-C chargers in the back anywhere. I've had a look under here and there isn't any. I've had a look in the seats, there aren't any there either. And if I pull down the armrest, I've got a cup holder, but again, no chargers. Now in the UK, oh, that's a very heavy bonnet. Now in the UK there are 3 main options to choose from when it comes to batteries and powertrains. So it starts off with the 60, which comes with a 58 kilowatt hour battery. That's a usable capacity, by the way, which offers up to 256 miles of range. It also comes with a 178 brake horsepower electric motor at the back of the car. And that's good for a 0 to 62 time of 8.7 seconds. Now if you go for the 80, you then get a 201 brake horsepower electric motor and the battery increases to 77 kilowatt hours. Again, that's the usable capacity for a total range of 333 miles. Now 0 to 62 is a little bit quicker at 8.5 seconds, but you're mainly paying for the extra range. Now there's also the sports line, which is pretty much the same as the 80, although range dips to 327 miles, which is a little bit odd because it's no faster in a straight line. However, it does sit a little bit lower and you get a slightly sportier suspension setup. Also, the design is slightly different and I wonder if that might affect the drag of the car. Now there are some versions that aren't available in the UK, like the 50, which is basically the entry-level version of the car, and you can't get it in the UK, you can only get it abroad. There's also going to be an 80X later this year, which is an all-wheel drive version of the 80, as well as a VRS version, which should boast around 300 brake horsepower. I just wanted to point out that this isn't the motor, that's at the back of the car and the batteries are underneath the car. And as the Enyaq doesn't come with a boot here or a frunk, then I thought I would at least have something to show you while I talk about the motor and battery range. And while I'm here, I wanted to show you one of Skoda's cool little inventions. Now you can get this on other Skodas, but it does make an appearance on the Enyaq as well. So we've got the washer fluid filler here, and it's got a rubber cap. So what? Well, what's cool about it is that if I lift it up like that and lift the front up, it forms a little funnel so you don't spill it all over all these electrical bits and bobs down here. The Czech have these really lovely number plates where they've got these cool stickers on and it's 3D. I'm very jealous of that. Anyway, in the back. Now this one has a power assisted tailgate, but that is actually an optional extra. As standard, you have to manually lift it up. And when you do open it up, you'll expose 585 litres of storage, which is massive. In fact, it's bigger than what you get on the ID.4, which only offers 543, but that's still pretty big. And it's typical Skoda back here because there's lots of things in here to make life a little bit easier when you're loading stuff in and out of the car. First of all, you have a bit of storage underneath the boot floor, and there's a really nice big bin back here where you can actually put the charging cables so they don't need to take up precious boot space. We've also got 2 little storage compartments down the side there. I'm not really sure what you could put in there, but if you're a family person, I'm sure you'll find something can go down there. We've also got 4 little hooks either side of the car to hang stuff off, maybe shopping, I don't know, whatever you want. You've got the hooks there. The luggage cover is also really easy. Just pull it out like that. When you want to put it back, you just go, simple, does it all automatically. We've also got release buttons at the side for the rear seat. So if you want to open up even more room, all you need to do, just pull these and the rear seats will fold down. And on petrol and diesel Skodas, you actually have an ice scraper next to the filler cap. But on the Enyaq, the electric car, they've moved it to up here on the boot lid. It is a very handy and very spacious car. Now, before we go out for a drive, I just wanted to point out that in true Skoda fashion, we have an umbrella in the door, and the door handle is slightly oddly shaped. So in the way it's positioned, it's kind of fine if you go and grab it like that, but when you get to about here, your hand has to go into a slightly awkward position. Now for me, it's absolutely fine, and for most people it will be, but if you have arthritis, it could be a bit of a pain. So what's it like on the road? Well, even before you turn the wheel, the Enyaq makes an incredible first impression. This whole cabin just feels so lovely and homely. Is that the right word to use for a car? Because that's what it feels like. It feels like the kind of place that you would want to spend a lot of time. And then as soon as you fire the car up and get a move on, you realize that Skoda has made a really very excellent car here. Now, as I've mentioned already, it's based on the ID.4, and those are very strong underpinnings indeed. In fact, if you want to watch my review of the ID.4, click the link in the top right hand corner for my full breakdown. It's incredibly smooth everywhere you drive it. I'm in Milton Keynes at the moment and the roads are already pretty flat, but I've been on some bumpy roads and this thing just irons it out. It is a very relaxing place to be indeed. It's also completely silent, even at higher speed. Okay, let's see if we get it up to 70. The only noise really that I can hear is a little bit of wind noise, which is actually quite common in electric cars because there's no low frequency hum from the engine to cover it up. But still, it's incredibly quiet in here. So it's very smooth and it's very quiet, and those are really the kind of things that you would expect from Skoda. But what isn't very Skoda is actually the way that it drives. And I don't mean cruising on a motorway, I mean drive, the steering. It's really lovely. While it's not brimming with feel like you would get in a sports car, but that's not what an Enyaq is, it gives you a really great idea about the car's weight and where it's positioned on the road. But what happens if you don't want to actually drive your Enyaq? Well, I can activate Travel Assist, which works as a kind of combination between adaptive cruise control and lane keep assist to keep you at the correct speed and within your lane, even if you're going around bends on the motorway or even on a single lane road like I'm on at the moment. It is very handy and makes cruising so easy. However, the Enyaq has a lot of optional extras, and that's part of it. If you want to have the driverless controls included in your car, you're going to need to spend money on the options list to get that put in. And I would say that's really the only caveat to the Enyaq driving experience is it's such a brilliant car and it is so cheap, but there is an extensive options list. It's relatively bare bones to start off with, and you'll need to start adding things on if you want any kind of luxuries. I still think you can enjoy an Enyaq without spending any money on the options list, but that you're going to certainly want to tick quite a few boxes to get the perfect car. I also wanted to try out some of the different driving modes in this car, but there's a slight problem of where, because this is a very early car, the touchscreen keeps freezing on me, and so I've been trying to reset the car, I've been trying to do lots of different things, and I just cannot get the infotainment system to respond. So if I go into driving modes, there are 4 different driving modes to choose from: Eco, Normal and Sport. Eco means the car will be a little bit more sluggish, but you'll be able to extend your battery life a bit more, and Sport obviously makes things a little bit more sporty. However, I can't try any of that out because the screen is frozen and it's not working. There's also an individual mode, and I'd love to see what options are in there. But again, I can't get into it. Skoda. I'd say the only downside to the way the car handles is that there's a little bit of body lean going through the corners, a bit more than what I found on the ID.4. So it just means that you might have to take corners at a slightly more steady pace. Do you know what's quite interesting is that the Enyaq feels quite speedy, but it doesn't have that shove that a lot of electric cars have when you put your foot down. It's very gradual and it picks up pace quickly, but gradually, so it's actually really comfortable to drive. That just sums up the whole Enyaq experience. It's very comfy. So 3 likes and 3 dislikes. First thing I love the way it drives. It's so smooth, it's so quiet, but it feels really quite pacey, and lovely steering. The second thing, the quality of this interior is so lovely. It just feels like a real step above that of the ID.4, and the ID.4 is a more expensive car currently. And the third thing is kind of typical Skoda, really, of just being ultra practical. I feel like I could live in this car. There are so many places to store stuff. The boot is gigantic. It's just such an immensely practical car. 3 dislikes. First of all, touchscreen infotainment system. One, I think it's an improvement on the ID.4, and it looks really great on this 13-inch panel. I still find it a little bit fiddly. It's a bit dull to look at, although I can't really judge it at the moment because it's not functioning in this test car. Second thing is just something to bear in mind, really, is that the price can add up quite quickly. So yes, it's cheap at £32,000, but the price can escalate when you start adding options on. So the model that we have here starts at 32,000, but with the options that it's got on, comes in at just over 40. And the third thing, it's really hard to think of a third thing that I don't like about this car. I think it is so good. Some slightly scratchy plastics here. There's not really a proper third thing. It's a very good car. I really rate it. And what I'd like to know down in the comments is that if you're after an ID.4, what is it that would make you want the ID.4 over the Enyaq? Because from where I'm sat, it feels like it's nicer, the materials are much nicer, it's more practical, and it's cheaper. So if it were my money and I wanted a practical electric SUV, I'd get an Enyaq.